Welcome today to our podcast, Breakthrough Conversations with Coach Pete, and I'm Pete's co-host, Gloria. Today, let's dive into the topic of parenting, or it could even be called reparenting. But we're both parents, so we've both had journeys for sure. And I've got to say, I've had 5 children, and there may be some similarities between some, but they are so completely different at the same time. What's your experience with that, Pete?
Oh, yes. We have 2 sons. I can't imagine 5. Amazing accomplishment. I don't mean just to have the 5, but to raise them, socialize them. It's great. A lot of laughs along the way, right? I was one of the things that really surprised me when we had our second son and very early on is how different they were. Here they came from the same mother, father. Biologically, they're more alike than anybody else in this world, the two of them, because they each share. I mean, you know a lot more about that than I do, but they just share so much chemically and biologically from us. And you would think that the two boys, and yet emotionally, their personalities from the get-go, there's some similarities, but quite different. And to this day, you know, they're not little 12-year-olds anymore. They're grown men, and they're different personalities, and they have been all along. And that was eye-opening for me. And I think my wife too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, we have two oldest sons, and then we have two daughters, and then we have our youngest son. And so there's 23 years between oldest and youngest. And
Wow.
I think that's how we survived parenting is because we did it, two and then two later and then one more. But it was quite different. I many times I come back to my big boys, my oldest, and I'll still seek forgiveness at different times. I was such a young parent, and I thought I was pretty knowledgeable, which I didn't know what I didn't know. And so with our daughters, then they received more benefits because they had a little bit older mother. I was in my 30s when I had my girls and very, very focused on them. And yet I wasn't really prepared to have girls. So that was interesting because I had a lot of ideals and I had my own traumas that I was actually projecting on my daughters. And yeah, so there's other place we've talked about owning stuff. So as a parent, for me to own stuff, but also to respect their boundaries too, as people. And I believe that's really important to do from the time they're really little, because they aren't born to us for us to just project our stuff onto. That's how we can actually duplicate the patterns that are not life-serving. So when we can reparent ourselves and take ownership of the things that we need to personally, then we can actually create a space that allows our children to develop and grow into who they came here to be instead of who I think they need to be. And those are two completely different things. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yes, totally. And again, like a lot of things we talk about in life and in relationships and parenting and all things we talk about, leadership, there's a balance. There's always a balance to strive for. And that's true of parenting as well. How much are we projecting from our own experience? We have to bring our own experience. You can't turn that off. But the awareness and looking at what was right and what was not so right about my upbringing, what was missing, I found early on, even with our first son, there's 2.5 years difference. With our son Isaac, I learned very early that parenting is a way to really not only raise a child, but raise yourself as well. We could fill in kind of the gaps. And I did this quite consciously, it came to me. And also had a lot of conversations with my brother, who was raising 2 sons as well, years behind mine, but still, we talked about being a different father than what we had.
Yeah.
And that's not being overly negative about my father. He did the best he could. I know that he did the best he could, but he came of a generation where there wasn't much psychology involved. There wasn't much self reflection. And emotionally, he was quite tight and quite rigid. So he didn't give us the love and the affection that we crave, that every little baby and boy and little girl crave. So having a child was a way for me to give that very consciously, and it sort of gave it to myself too. It was really kind of an interesting dynamic that I felt really strongly, and all the way through raising our two boys. And then to see their differences, and then you had to parent differently to a certain extent for each one because they had different needs. It's really eye-opening. And I learned something. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I learned something that I, as a parent, and other parents that I have in my coaching practice, they actually go through the child development stages along with their kids. And that can be a real learning process for both. You're
Yeah.
both giving the support as your children go through that child development stage, but you go through it too. And it's good to know that. It's good to realize that there's new challenges to you as a parent. And it all comes back to choices, how I'm going to deal with that pushing of the boundaries, if in what used to be called the terrible twos, which is a horrible phrase, or adolescence. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to push boundaries. Well, we as parents can learn from that as they go through it.
Yeah. One of the things that I've worked with parents, I've taught a lot of different parenting courses, classes, and work with parents for years. And one of the things I like to give them is the continuum of 0 to 18, because supposedly at 18 they're ready to fly out the nest. I actually think it needs to be pushed out to 25 or so. Yet for 18, for them to go off to college or whatever they're going to do, what are the skill sets those children are going to need to have developed in order to be successful in those when they transition there? And do you want them to just, okay, you don't have to do any of these things. Now you're 18, now you got to do it all. But there needs to be kind of a continuum that you are actually aware of. Um, and there's many different philosophies that are out there around what's going to be in the best interest of the child. And I just want to say that nobody really gets to weigh in on your opinion except you. And it's really important for parents to do their own homework, to know what they believe, and to actually even test the boundaries of their own beliefs. Because, when we're really honest with ourselves about what we want for our children, we need to know what we want for ourselves first. What are you modeling for your child? Are you the kind of parent that's going to say, you need to go clean your room, but your room's a mess? I mean, that's really not congruent. So, what is it that you want? You need to know that first. Um, and what is it that you value? And are those even in alignment? Because how are you going to instill
Absolutely.
those values or beliefs within your child if you're not living them yourself?
What comes to my mind, a lot of things come to mind as you're talking. One of the things is mindfulness. If mindfulness, I mean, it's important in just living an individual life for sure to be mindful of every moment, but it's magnified when it comes to being a parent. You need to be mindful. What am I saying? What's the impact? Am I teaching my values? My wife had a beautiful ceramic piece that we just found again. I guess it was from a poem or something. It talked about a parent's role is to give roots and wings.
Mhm.
Roots are the values that you share, the things you want to teach, and the ways of being, and the guidance. And wings, go fly. And I'm still learning. My little kitties are middle-aged men, right? And I'm still learning, let them fly. I've done everything I can do. So when you talked about the continuum of, 1 to 18, and 18, they're supposed to go off. And personally, I was not prepared for the empty nest. With my kids flying, it's another stage you really have to grapple with as a parent and allow to develop. So yeah, those different stages and being mindful, so important, don't you think? Really.
They are. And I also want to say that no matter how old your children are, they're your children. They're still your
Yeah,
little kids, even though now they may
absolutely.
be their parents themselves. There is nothing that I've enjoyed. I don't know. That's that I can't say nothing. One of the things I've enjoyed so much is to watch my children be parents, or to watch my children be a coach, or my children be a teacher. So
Yes.
my eldest daughter, she followed in my footsteps, and she taught other children how to play the piano. That was part of her growth and development as a leader herself, to step into that teaching role. She was really good at it. Or she would step into teaching people how to do horsemanship. So she taught people. She's an excellent dog trainer. She can actually speak dog. I tell you, the girl is really brilliant. And then with my sons, my oldest sons, when they had children, they'd call me on the phone and say, "Mom, I'm so sorry." Because all of a sudden, because they're a parent, they're starting to perceive differently. They're starting to think differently because they're considering another being that they love. And when my youngest daughter had her first child, oh, it transformed our relationship. And she came to me and
Oh, I
said,
bet.
"Mom, how can you love someone so much?"
Wow.
I mean, it just expands our whole identity, our whole perception of life when we begin to love in this way. Yeah.
I relate so much to what you're talking about with my sons. We haven't been blessed with grandchildren yet. They're waiting. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. One of the lessons there was I always thought, wow, I'd love to be a grandfather. Can't wait. But I realize I don't get a choice. It's not up to me. So you just go with the flow. But what you said before about seeing your kids coach or teach, what a great feeling that is as they grow into adulthood and take on responsibility in business or in sports and take those roles. It's a great feeling to watch them develop. And it's a learning experience too for you as parent. We learn from all of the stages that our kids go through, or we can or maybe should learn. It's there for the learning. It's there for the personal growth. Um, love it, love it.
Well, right along with that, one thing that I learned, thankfully, and that I remind myself of, thankfully, is that I do not offer advice to my children. I actually don't offer advice to my coaching clients or people that I counsel, because there needs to be an invitation for that. People need to be open to that, and that's respectful. I mean, that's considerate. That is really important, because unless someone is actually open for information, don't share it. That's not helpful. And so there's skill sets about that in parenting. It's almost like you can coach them. You can be open. They can be open. You can ask them, "Are you open to this?" Or you can even recognize an opportunity, and you can wait for a microsecond of a good mood when they're a teen. And then you can slip in some kind of an open-ended question that might open that door for you to have a little bit of a conversation, and then recognize when it's time to be quiet too, because people don't need a bunch of lectures or anything like that. That closes the door to the relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, you're there for guidance, you're there for mentoring, but not for deciding, not for the doing. And that's true of parenting. And it's also true of coaching and counseling. It is really true. One little quick thing that came to my mind.
Mhm.
I had the experience of going through Landmark Worldwide, which is a wonderful kind of group coaching. I don't know if they would like me talking about it like that, but it is coaching on a grand scale. You go through with like a lot of people. And I went through with 140 other people in New York City, my first Landmark, what they call their forum. And one of the coaches, the leader, had us look around. He turned the lights on in the room, and there's 140 people sitting there. And he said, everybody who's in the ages of 19 to 25, stand up. So in this room of a lot of different age groups, about, I don't know, 20, 25% of the people stood up, 20% maybe. And he said, everybody else, look around. Look at those 19, 20, 23-year-olds and look at them. And he said, or she said, those are the ages your parents were when they had you.
Oh, wow.
That was eye-opening just to see, as by that time I was a definitely beyond middle-aged man in this personal growth program. And I'm looking at these kids, they look like kids to me. It was a great learning experience. Our parents were so young, as we were typically when we had our kids. It's kind of a way of saying, give them a break. They did the best they could. You know what I mean? It was a good lesson.
That's an
Uh,
excellent one. Yeah.
I love this discussion about parenting because it works on so many different levels, personally and with your kids and your extended family and life. We really learn a lot.
Yeah, we do when we take the time to reflect on it and be present with it. So, yeah, thanks for being present with me today and for the inspiration to have the conversation.
Thank you, Gloria. Love it.